Warning, the following video contains spoilers of the Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn main scenario questline. If you prefer to stay spoiler-free and experience the story for yourself, stop watching now. This is your one and only warning. Ah yes, Hydaelyn. It's a giant talking rock. Final Fantasy XIV is an online multiplayer RPG set in the realm of Eorzea. It takes multiple other elements from other Final Fantasy games and just kind of mashes them together in this beautiful little hodgepodge that has a little something for everybody. Not all content is for everyone, but this game has a little something for everybody, whether that be raiding, PvP, or just cosmetics. But one thing that really sets it apart from everything else is the sheer degree of story that comes with it. The game's main scenario questline has a lot of twists and turns to the story that adds a lot more depth to the gameplay beyond just getting simple EXP. But holy falls balls, is there a lot to get through. The game's gone through a relaunch and 2 whole expansions, and now there's a 3rd one getting ready to come out. I mean, there are literally hours upon hours upon hours of story. I don't have time to commit to that. I gotta go to work and go to school and then come home and fire up the grill and fry up some soup. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do. That's too much information for me to process. Well, that's why I'm making this video, because I know a lot of people don't have the time or the patience to watch a lot of those cutscenes. I mean, most of my friends just skip them anyway. And a couple hundred hours of story can definitely seem very daunting, which is why I'm making a possibly vain attempt to try and sum everything up as semi-accurately as I possibly can. So if you want to get caught up, or if you even just want a brief recap, hopefully I can help you out. Patch 2.0, A Realm Reborn. Now, by my own admission, I did not play the game during its original release of 1.0, so there is a lot of that story I just know nothing about. Thankfully, you don't really need to know a ton about it, but I'm still going to talk about a couple of things just for my own sanity. To the far north of Eorzea lies the continent of Ul'dah, which houses Garlemald, home of the Garlean Empire. Several years before the events of 1.0, the Garlean Empire, one Solzos Galvis, set about conquering the entirety of Ul'dah as well as parts of the eastern continent of Othard. And because evil empires will never ever get tired of expanding, he shortly after set his sights on Eorzea and went so far as to conquer the northernmost region of Alamigo. I own this. Unfortunately for him, though, this would be the end of the road for a bit, as he'd go back and forth with Eorzea for the next 15 to 20 years without covering any more ground. This all changed one day when one particular Imperial legate, one Nail von Darnus, got so fed up waiting for the 3DS remake of Majora's Mask, he went straight to the Emperor and asked for him to revive Project Meteor. The goal of this project had been to recreate the power of the ancient forgotten magic meteor, even though, you know, that's level 3 Black Mage limit break, but apparently the Garleans missed the memo on that one. Solas, being incredibly frustrated, approved this project, not knowing that Nail planned to use his power to crash the Lesser Moon Dalamud into Eorzea, which he very promptly set about doing at the Cartano Flats. Have a seat, but don't sit down, though. That's no moon, that's a space dragon. His name is Bahamu. Barry. Turns out good old Barry was sealed inside the moon by the even more ancient Allagan Empire, and for some reason they're just kind of responsible for a lot of the stuff in the story. And understandably, Barry was pretty damn cranky for being woken up from a 1,000-year nap, and despite the combined forces of the Eorzean Alliance, the newly formed Scions of the 7th Dawn, and the Warrior of Light, Barry unleashes his powerful magic across the realm, causing a devastating calamity from which the realm can never possibly recover. 5 years later, the realm has almost completely recovered, and you join your character as they have a foreshadowing-filled dream. Right as you're about to throw down scrap with a spooky masked boy, you get woken up by a sexy grandpa who just immediately assaults you with all sorts of personal questions. In the middle of his lengthy conversation, though, you get attacked by some angry locals, and then you just speed off to your destination. Also, don't you dare forget about these elf children, because they will be important later. Also, if you start in Gridania, you get to watch this Moogle drink almost as much as my dad. From here, based upon your starting class, you will go to one of 3 different save states: Limsa Lominsa, Ul'dah, or Gridania. Despite the different locations, though, the story does pretty much go the same regardless. Shortly in, you have a spooky encounter. In the aftermath, you find the water crystal, which I guess is tied to Hydaelyn's blessing or something. Okay, I'll be honest, the game doesn't even really explain what this is all about, and I even own the Encyclopedia Eorzea, and that book doesn't say bananas about this. Speaking of bananas, do you know that bananas have latex proteins in them? It's true. As a result of this, you speak to Hydaelyn itself, and you know what? Everything it says could be important, but it just as easily could not be, because everything it says is just as cryptic as the Da Vinci Code. Then you and a bunch of randos fly around it because, sure, why not? Then it's back to reality. By this point, you'll also have met at least one new pal who you just kind of keep bumping into. For those who started in Limsa Lominsa, you were introduced to Y'shtola, a sassy Makode conjurer who half the male player base wants in their bedroom. Those who star in Ul'dah get Thancred, a Dante lookalike in Lays Man who the other half of the male player base wants in their bedroom. And Gridanians get Thaumaturge Papalimo as headstrong companion Ida, who quite honestly, no one really wanted either of them in their bedroom, so they just kinda got lumped together. Throughout all this, you'll periodically have visions of the past, which you'll find happen with just enough convenience to keep the plot moving and you out of the dark. No matter where your journey starts though, it all culminates in a showdown with a spooky mask boy and his pet demon, after which you get invited to a party with the local leaders. Turns out it's a bigger rager than you can handle though, because you pass out, have a vision of Judgment Day, and then wake up in your local inn. From here though, you are officially inducted into the Adventurers Guild and are sent off on a series of dungeon crawls, facing off against fearsome foes such as, definitely not Prince Sidon, Tentacles, and we're just gonna call this guy Daddy Issues. So to be fair, I relate. The dungeons themselves are pretty simple though, and the final bosses all have mechanics that tie to ads. Prince Zora summons ads that can be chased away by closing the gates on them, which I was also feeling really lazy and didn't get proper footage of. Call of Cthulhu summons imps that make them immune to damage while they're still alive. And Basement Dweller summons ads that in turn go summon more ads, but in all honesty, you can just kind of ignore them. News of your deeds travels pretty quick though, and you are then given a formal invitation to meet with the leader of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. After teleporting to Western Thanaland and wishing for the first, but definitely not the last time that the Aetheryte was right outside the Waking Sands, you meet Minfilia. She's the current acting leader of the Scions, and for some reason her skirt has a hole in it that shows off her butt. What am I doing with my life? She explains that the visions you've been having are a result of a power known as the Echo, which very few people possess and no one really knows the true nature of. They are, however, constantly learning new things about his powers and capabilities, immediately seeing up as a handy-dandy plot device. And she rounds out all his exposition by telling you that she as well possesses the power of the MacGuffin and she would like your aid in fighting the primal threat. But what is a primal? Well, primals are beings of pure etheric energy that usually get summoned by the local beast tribes when they're horribly distraught. They're typically fiercely loyal and protective of those that summon them, and in some cases are actually pretty chill. That would be all well and good, but they also require a constant supply of ether, the planet's lifeblood, to stay in physical form. They typically draw this from crystals, but if none are available, they'll draw it from the land surrounding them. This can ultimately bleed out the land around them, making it unhospitable and impossible for life to sustain itself. Fearing that one such primal might be a little too close to home, Minfilia sends you out to investigate a series of kidnappings out by... Hold on, I need to... Give me a sec, I need to say this with a straight face. Oh boy, it's Camp Drybone. After some investigation, you learn a local con artist has been masquerading as a merchant to help some Malta snatch people up. Unfortunately though, when you go to confront him, it turns out the corruption extends to the brass blades as well. As a result, you are then captured and brought to the Bowl of Embers, where you agree with the primal Ifrit. And on display of power, he then proceeds to backstab his non-Malta allies and tempers them. Tempering is basically a form of primal mind control where those affected become unflinchingly devoted to their primal masters, even to the point of self-destruction. There's also no known cure for tempering, so those afflicted are usually just straight up put to death. It's okay though, because remember when I mentioned the Echo was a Deus Ex Machina? Well, as it turns out, in addition to making you Raven Simone, it also makes you immune to primal mind control. This causes Ifrit to throw a big old temper tantrum and attack you.
I did my time, and I want out, so abusive!
The fight though isn't too hard, just dodge AoEs and kill the nail when it pops up. Also, I'm definitely not doing this on Blue Mage to try and farm Eruption. Once you've conquered Carnage's concept art, you're greeted with a cutscene of two shifty characters having a conversation in the aftermath. And you know they're up to no good because their names are question marks. Remember in Pokemon Silver and Gold when your rival's name was question marks and then you found out he stole a Pokemon? Boom, same logic. That being said, you shortly learn that their names are Nero and Olivia, and then they exposition themselves up so they can be villains later on. Also, you find a fire crystal, I guess. From here, you return to the Waking Sands, where Minfilia congratulates you on your victory, but as it turns out, she's not alone in that regard. She's been joined by representatives of the three grand companies of Eorzea. Turns out, killing a primal makes everybody want pizza, that big old pepperoni pizza. And of course, as expected, you can only choose to join one. However, rather than rushing you to make a decision, they all make the fairly reasonable request that you attend a series of speeches given by all the leaders of the grand companies. You can attend these meetings in whatever order you want, because for whatever reason, they don't start until you actually show up. Of course, you're not attending these speeches alone, and you're interrupted at each one by the elf boy Alphanode, who proceeds to tell you the symbolism behind each grand company's flag. The grand companies are as follows. The Immortal Flames, who represent an undying bond of community and commerce as they push forward towards a brighter future. The Maelstrom, the unstoppable storm that will never cease to push back against the waves of adversity that oppose them. And the Order of the Twin Adder, who have, they have two snakes. You ever been bit by two snakes? It's way worse than being bitten by one. Ultimately though, your decision doesn't really affect much outside of some flavor text and some cosmetic gear you can get down the road, so pick whichever one you want. Although I'm just saying, don't be a lemur, be a flamer. After exposing yourself to frontline memes, you then reconvene with the rest of the Scions for your next assignment. Turns out the Twin Eyes are right spooked with the local Sylph beast tribe because they're horrified they might summon the primal Ramu. However, the Sylphs are actually pretty laid back, so the Adders are calling upon the Scions to mediate to try and reach a peaceful compromise. You head to East Shroud and do a bunch of tasks to earn their trust, only to find out their leader isn't even home. Turns out he wandered off into an abandoned prison called 1,000 Miles of Totorak, and now you need to run in there to retrieve him. It also just so happens to be all my friends' least favorite leveling dungeon. And honestly, it is pretty boring. You just run around grabbing photo cells, and the last boss is just a tank and spank. Before you actually engage with the final boss, though, you're introduced to a spooky mask boy. You can tell he's especially spooky because his mask is red. He introduces himself as Ul'dah and spouts a lot of nonsense about light and dark before disappearing into the shadows, kinda like a Kingdom Hearts villain. In the aftermath, though, you free the Sylph leader and everybody regroups in little slots where he hits you up with some doots. Turns out Ramu got summoned before, but he didn't really have any beef with the Gridanians, so he just kinda sat back and chilled. Of course, he is still a primal, so his presence alone was enough to temper some of the Sylphs, which is why some of them are hostile. Now knowing that Ramu as well as the Sylphs are not a threat, you get ready to head back to base, but not before the Sylph leader gives you a Thunder Crystal, which might be important, maybe? I don't know. You report back to Minfilia, and she's actually really spooked about your encounter with La Cucaracha. Oh, also one of the Sylphs follows you home because I don't know. She suspects Ul'dah may be an Ascian, basically the boogeyman of Eorzea. When something goes awry or amiss, they're usually in the background pulling the strings for their own agenda. She sends you out to follow some leads on Ul'dah, but honestly you don't really accomplish much outside of learning a bunch of Alamegan refugees are really cranky. You then visit a spooky haunted mansion, which is also the shortest leveling dungeon in the game. I'm actually serious. If you know what you're doing, you can finish this dungeon in 10, maybe 15 minutes. You finish the dungeon, and then two of Ul'dah's lackeys show up and they just sort of taunt you and then kinda leave. It winds up working out though, because when you return from running around being a goofus, Minfilia has some new fists. What am I even talking about? Turns out the Maelstrom decided to encroach upon Kobold territory, and as a result they felt horribly violated and decided to summon their primal titan. But it also turns out a group known as the Company of Heroes also beat Titan in the past, so Y'shtola decides it's important to go get their expertise and knowledge. This leads to a ton of busy work, which culminates in you entering the dungeon of Braveflox's Longstuff to retrieve some dragon cheese. Although reptiles don't have milk glands, so I don't know how a dragon would make milk, let alone cheese, but let's just not think about that. This is also the first story dungeon you'll do where every boss has a mechanic associated with them. But honestly, nothing here is really too complicated outside of maybe breaking yourself out of a bubble and not staying the big old dragon at the end in a pile of goopus. After obtaining that delicious dragon custard, the Company of Heroes decides you are perfectly worthy of facing Titan yourself. Y'shtola rigs up an Aetheryte so you can slide into those DMs, and it turns out that just like Ifrit, Titan is a big old crank. In fact, he actually blames you for the Kobold's problems because as a Warrior of Light, he feels that you're even more responsible than the Maelstrom for the Kobold's pain and suffering. Just proving to be nothing but a big old grumpus, you then fight Titan within the navel.
Now I know y'all be loving this shit right here. L-I-M-P, biscuit is right here.
While definitely being a spookier fight than Ifrit, Titan isn't too bad as long as you dodge his landslide attack and break people out of jails when they get trapped in them. And if you do get hit by a landslide, well now would be a good time to go take a smoke break. Once you've bested Sumo Supreme, you're then rewarded with even more Garlean foreshadowing. This time Nero reports directly to Ul'dah, joined by a big old beefy shield boy named Ratatouille. You also find an Earth Crystal in the aftermath, and the game doesn't tell you what it's for, and I don't know what it's for, and that's just a fact that really bugs me. That foreshadowing comes full throttle though, because when you return to the Waking Sands, you're treated with a horrifying sight. Well, if you sat through all that, then I am so sorry. I was debating where I wanted to end this first part, but I figured, you know what, that'd be a good cliffhanger spot, because honestly, things kind of started to pick up after this. Originally, I was just going to make this a dumb thing for a friend of mine, but honestly, I saw enough people out there who wanted an MSQ recap that I figured I'd just dive off the edge and make it public. That being said, whether you're an older player or a newer player, I definitely recommend you go play the main scenario quest for yourself. Sometimes it can be a good time, even if the early levels can be kind of a boring little lull. And this is my first time making any kind of video like this, so if you want, you can leave a comment below and just let me know what you think. Tell me what you like, tell me what you hate, even maybe tell me what you think I can do better so I can keep it in mind for the next video. I mean, even negative comments would be nice, because at least then someone will pay attention to me. I'm also already well into making making the next part, although I can't make any promises about it coming out soon because it's the end of the school year, which means my workplace is getting pretty nutty. So if you want to know when the next part is ready, you can click that subscribe button, or I mean honestly don't, because I'll probably just shove the video in your face when it's done anyway, like I'm going to with this one. Or if you want to say hi to me on Twitter, you can click that little bird in the corner that's horribly out of place, because I normally put the bird in the description, but I want to try something different and change it's scary, okay? And well, quite frankly, I just don't know how to end these videos. Later.